Welcome to the Starseed Goddess podcast. I'm your host, Alice Hadi, and today we have a beautiful guest, Jennifer Gilchrist, with us. And we're going to dive into the topic of activating your clairvoyance. So, welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you
And
so much for
let's
having me.
start. You're welcome. And let's start by just explaining so that everyone is on the same page. How would you define clairvoyance to begin with?
Clairvoyance is your spiritual ability to see energy, so to perceive the unseen world. And there's a lot of different ways that your clairvoyance will work for you. In some ways, it might be when you're in meditation, you might notice and see visions or colors. It's also tied to your dream space in that way. And you also might see things with your eyes open. Sometimes you might see little angel
Mm-hmm.
lights or orbs, shadows. Sometimes you like notice energy in the side of your peripheral. And that is just different indicators of how your clairvoyance is giving you signals and signs that you're perceiving energy that you can't see with your physical eyes.
Beautiful. So, if someone is not seeing anything during meditation, for example, does it mean that their clairvoyance is not activated yet? Like, what's going on?
I think it could be a number of things. I believe that we all have access, we all have ability to access all of our psychic and intuitive gifts. Okay. They're part of our chakra system, but some of them might be more have been turned on more naturally since the time we were
Mm-hmm.
born and maybe not even realize it than others. So a lot of people, when I pull my students in my program and in my groups as well, the clairvoyance of not visually seeing is one of the biggest blocks people have. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it can be it doesn't mean that your clairvoyance is not working. It just may not be working in the way that you are thinking or expecting it to work, for one. And it could also be a lot of fears and blocks. I mean, there's a lot of times where I think children, we come into the world, we're super open and sensitive and don't realize it. And then it's like monsters in the closet, and their parents telling them, it's like you start perceiving things like, oh, and we kind of pull that wool over our eyes because it can be a bit overwhelming if we don't have adults to or people in our life to talk to about it, which most of us didn't really grow up in a society or with a school system or families that really talked about these things. And so sometimes I think that we've shut it down out of fear. Sometimes it could be religious upbringing. I was raised in a very conservative Christian upbringing. And so first we just didn't talk about it. But then on top of that, it was actually, evil or the devil's work in a
Mm-hmm.
way. And so there's sometimes, there's many different reasons why we have shut this ability down. But if you have a will, there's a way. We all have the opportunity to open it up. It's just like any other muscle or skill set. It does need to be worked and practiced with.
Thank you. I really love like everything is so on point there. Like you explain it in such a simple and clear way. And speaking of like whatever you're just saying, what comes up to me, which I'm gonna share, and then you can just add on later. And I believe this is probably something you have seen a lot in your clients as well. So for those of you who are listening, you might resonate in one way or another. So one is the upbringing and external. So let's call it like the external world, like what is happening outside of us. And whatever we are seeing in movie doesn't really help too, like if you like from my personal experience at least, when we talk about clairvoyance and whatever I see in movie, whether Western or Asian, clairvoyance are often linked to being able to see the bad stuff. Like I'm gonna see somebody is gonna die or somebody is gonna have a crash. Why would I wanna have clairvoyance? Like if that's all I'm seeing, right? Like versus like I'm gonna see a future that is so bright and I'm gonna see myself blossoming and growing. So I feel that like that is one. And another one is kind of more a mix of external and internal is that probably those, like you say, whether it is children or adult, when they actually start to have their clairvoyance activated, even it's either they don't know that's happening or even if they know it might get overwhelming. So for example, from mine, when I first started my clairvoyance, I started to see like flashes of past life way too much than I needed. At least
Mhm.
that's how I felt. And they were not like the most beautiful past life. And the next thing I realized without trying, I started to close up my clairvoyance again. And
Mhm.
then, of course, later on in the journey, then I realized that, and then I work on activating them again. But that is just like a very real life, tangible example. So, how would you suggest to those people who might have experienced what I've just shared, and to prevent, I guess, what you call overwhelm, if you may?
Well, for me, there's a couple. There's lots to say on that. I can resonate with so much of what you were sharing as well in terms of all of that. When it comes to like I see energetic overwhelm, learning to me to having the tools and boundaries, learning how to work with the tools so they weren't just haphazardly like happening to me. I remember when I first had my awakening, it's like my stuff was totally shut down as well. And then it just
Mm-hmm.
came blasting open. And at first I was very excited. I was seeing hearing my grandfather. He's the first person that came through clairaudiently for me. And then my grandparents and the angels. It was all very exciting. And then all of a sudden, the heavier, darker, like all the other energies, fears came up, right? And so I felt awake, but in the dark. And so I kind of went through a similar opening and then shutting down again as well. And I think because I felt like it was just happening to me, like I didn't have the control. So I think one misnomer is that when you work on learning, at least the way I teach, and I assume you probably will as well, when you start to feel the control, like being able to be the one who is directing the energy, you can actually turn it on and off and up and down. It actually makes you feel more in control in that way than just having things happen to you, or like you said, the fear of seeing something bad happen to a loved one, or whatever the fear might be about the future. And so to me, learning to develop them made me feel empowered because I felt awake but in the dark. And that was scarier to me. So when I started learning how to use meditation and really learn some energetic boundaries, I think a lot of, for me, I was highly sensitive and empathic, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know it my whole life either. And so I was very just open like a sponge to everything. Like if I was in a room of people who were like fighting, or if it was angry, it was like the energy of all that I would feel it, and of course shut the clairvoyance down from seeing it, all of that energy. And so when I started learning, like, oh, I can have my own energetic bubble, and I don't have to be the effect of all the energy around me. I actually can then have a clear space to direct my focus of what I want to focus on and be open to bringing in or allowing into my field, whether it's through my clairvoyance or through the energy feeling, through all of the different senses. I have a better sense of control. So to me, it's about meditation and learning how to build that skill set and learning how to understand what is having your own energetic sovereignty within the collective energy or within the household energy, right? Knowing what's yours and what's others. That's the first place to start, I think, because otherwise other people's moods and energy and the environments that you're in start to dictate and affect how you experience and perceive the world through your extrasensory abilities, which will be overwhelming most of the time or a lot of the time. And so for me, energetic boundaries, which is just meditation tools and starting to learn to recognize what's yours, what's others, and knowing that you have the power because you have the body and you get to control your energetic field. It's actually our responsibility. But when we take on that responsibility and do daily rituals like meditation to clear our energy field, we create a clear connection and we start to then have deeper levels of discernment, which also empowers us to feel safe and also just to determine who and how we want to interact with the energy, whether it's coming through our intuition or spirit guides or whatever. We have a deeper sense of control within that. Does that make sense? So I think it's kind of a big question. Looks like there's an airplane going by. I hope that's not too loud for you.
No, I didn't hear
Okay.
it at all. That's
Hmm.
probably the angel flying by and going
Yes.
like, yes, 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 yes. That's a lot, and that is amazing. Like a lot of wisdom are being shared here. Is not like a one way street or a one thing. It's a mixture of everything, right? And as you said, a lot of us are not even aware that we are sensitive to energy. So it start probably like from a spiritual hygiene or energetic hygiene of like knowing how to set our boundary, how to do energetic clearing, and having that spiritual practice on daily basis. So that will help to prevent the overwhelm, and most importantly, take back our power. So we don't give our power away to whatever we think we watch on TV or whatever lower entity, if you want to call that.
Mhm,
And then as we have that principles, then it becomes safe for us
mhm,
to open up our energy channel. because there is one thing I realize is really important is that feeling of safety, which we can give ourselves, by the way. It's not something we need to take from outside. So when we feel safe in our body, in our own power, in our own energy, that we can be the one who decide with intention and clarity what we want to see, what we want to work with. That's when the energy channel open up and we must start to see things that whether it is with eyes open or eyes closed, which leads me to this is what we call, or some people call channeling, right? So, how does channeling relate to clairvoyance? Like, what role does clairvoyance play in relation to channeling? If that question makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think they all interact, right? Like all of our
Yeah.
psychic senses begin to interact together. I believe like our clairvoyance is sort of the seed of our intuition. It really
Mm-hmm.
does interact with all of our other intuitive psychic gifts, however you want to call them. I look at the channeling abilities housing more in the crown and the throat chakra. And then the
Mm-hmm.
third eye is really a bridge to that energy as well. So some interesting things because you asked about activating the clairvoyance. One thing is I think sometimes like you said have these ideas of like, oh, I remember when I first started taking clairvoyant training. I thought everybody was like watching this HD movie with a remote that could just play it and watch it and then rewind it. And I was like, I'm just seeing black. I don't see anything. I was getting so frustrated. I was like, I'm trying and trying. But I had this expectation about how it was going to be. And really, our clairvoyance, it might be very fleeting. It might be very faint. There's not just one way that it works. And there's so many other gifts around your clairvoyance. And so when you talk about channeling, I think the clairvoyance does play an important role. And one of them is that your clairvoyance is your ability to see spiritual truth. It's your ability to discern a truth from a lie. It's your ability to just to be in a vibration that you have that spiritual vantage point so that you are looking at things from your higher self perspective versus your ego and your fear. So what it does is it creates the space of neutrality, a space of non-judgment, a space that's up out of your own egos, wounds, fears, and beliefs and programming, and up into that deeper connection with your higher self. Now, the channeling actually works through your crown chakra as that bridge to your higher self. And so it's like, I think it kind of gives a deepened level of discernment when you're
Mm-hmm.
translating the information, whether it's coming through a clear cognizance of knowing through your crown or your telepathic channels of clairaudience, whatever it might be. They really do all work together, but I think that clairvoyance plays, that's one really important aspect, I would say, of how it supports, for sure. So it's not always
Beautiful.
just the pictures you see or how clear you see. It could definitely be. And then I think it's just the backboard. So another thing that's coming to mind is that's another aspect because I read off my knowing quite a bit. My clairvoyance is very active. But if you were inside of my head, you might think it's not very colorful in there, but I know what I'm seeing. So my clairvoyance really works with my crown chakra to decipher and let me know. So I might get if I see an orb of energy meditation or at a point, well, I start to ask the open ended questions because that's how your higher self and your intuition begins to open up and respond, or even your spirit guides for that matter, right? You're asking with curiosity, well, what does that represent? And then from there, the download of the channeled knowing behind what is that color? What is that symbol? What is that synchronicity even? Even, how you see synchronicities like numbers. That's actually part of your clairvoyance, illuminating and picking out specific things with your
Mm-hmm.
eyes open. And people don't realize that that's actually an active part of your clairvoyance working for you, seeing signs and synchronicities. But sometimes you don't know what they mean. And so when you start to ask, well, what is that representing for me? Your channeling, you're starting to use your claircognizance, your knowing to bring forward the deeper wisdom behind it. Does that make sense? It's kind of like that backboard. So yeah, they all work together, but it's
Yeah,
fun.
definitely. Like all of the four clairs, they work together. And there is no one that is better than the other, no matter what our mind might think, and they are interconnected, as you mentioned, and you beautifully put the link among them. And I love how you point out that it is about discernment and seeing the truth,
Mhm.
because it is not just, as you said, it's not just about seeing things visually always. And again, because you heard what people say, what they see during the meditation, and you went, I see nothing, right? But it's not that. And I love how you mentioned that seeing things like angel numbers are also that. And another thing I want to highlight is also this is the way I interpret it is clairvoyance can also means intuition. Although like people tend to link intuition with claircognizance. However, I do believe like they are kind of linked because sometimes it is about, as you say, it's about the third eye chakra because that's where you learn how to discern the truth. So what I would say to those people who are activating their four clairs, one of your clair might come out first before the others, or they might come out together, doesn't matter. Just because we are covering one of the clairs because obviously of time, doesn't mean that this is the only way it's going to happen and this is the one thing that you need to focus on, because as you focus on activating your the clairvoyance, the rest of it might just open up and vice versa, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they really start to work together. It's like you can get a hearing and then an idea and a knowing and an insight. Right? They all start really to come in at the same time. Another thing too that your clairvoyance is part of your active imagination, and so
Mm-hmm.
letting yourself have permission. Another way to stimulate it. Because when we're trying too hard to do it perfect, I'm glad you
Yep.
brought that up. She's like the perfectionism. Am I doing it right or am I doing it wrong? That right there already puts us like off kilter from being open to receiving in that point, right? We've kind of moved out of that flow of energy. But when we can just allow ourselves to daydream, to use our imagination, to color, to draw. Sometimes I'll tell
Mm-hmm.
people when I'm teaching my students how to learn energy boundaries and grounding meditation type tools, it's like, well, start to color and draw that. Like, if you knew what color that grounding cord looked like today, what color would it be? And just trust your knowing,
Mm-hmm.
trust what comes to you, and really start to connect that inner child and that imagination and bring it visual to you by just coloring, being playful with it, right? It does start to turn on that visual aspect a bit more. So that's kind of an easy, safe way to play in that energy a little bit too.
And it's also a fun and creative and somewhat grounded way to work with that, I guess.
Yes, exactly.
And especially like if you come from a corporate background or just a very logical masculine background like I do, you might
Wow.
find that I think you did too, right? Did you?
Well, I've been always in a creative industry in terms of my
Okay, cool.
so I own, but I've owned my own business. And I would definitely say I was in my masculine because I was a single self-employed mom and I was building my own business from the time I was in my 20s. And so though it was a hairdressing business and specializing hair and makeup, so I had the creative aspect was always there. I very much had to run the house, be the mom, be the dad,
Mhm.
kind of,
Mhm.
go to the marketing, go to the networking, do the, I was doing a lot
The
of more
super
masculine.
mom.
Yes, well, and I was definitely in my masculine energy just to make life happen, even though I was
Mhm.
fortunate to have a creative job. I think if I had everything all on the masculine, I probably would have, I don't know, it would have been very difficult for my personality type. So, yeah, but it definitely had to learn how to balance my feminine for sure.
Exactly. I mean, I believe everyone goes through something similar, or maybe the opposite end of being too feminine and having to learn the masculine. And the reason I brought this up is because you were talking about drawing. And I knew that for me, because of the logical and masculine background. For example, abstract art is really difficult for me at the beginning because, like, what am I drawing? There is no structure, there is no sample, there is no right way to do it. Like, it doesn't make sense. Um, Asking me to draw something that I haven't seen yet, like, what does joy look like? How do I know? Like, it doesn't make sense, right? However, you brought up such a great tips that I believe that this is really an amazing tool that you guys can practice. I mean, if you have kids, just play with your kids. It's a bonding time and it's a time to activate your clairvoyance and your kids' clairvoyance too. So I think that will blend in really nice. Or just have your own self care. Take a piece of paper, a few color pen and just start to draw something and you might be surprised what you see. It might be difficult at the beginning, but you know,
Yeah,
play around with it and see what it brings. And
definitely.
also to let go of the judgment when you draw it. And don't go around like, oh, it doesn't look pretty or things like that.
Exactly. We're on the same page there. I was going to say, yes, the perfectionism definitely likes to creep in. And I would say that too, where we have the biggest blocks and resistance, we often have the most power and ability to transmute into a gift as well. Because I remember in school as well, creative writing was the hardest subject for me. And here I am,
Mm-hmm.
a creative content creator and intuitive. You know what I mean? It's sort of like I could look at creative writing papers and I just be blank page. You know, I just felt so stuck on that. But when it comes to that, I love how you use the tip as well. Like, what does my joy look like today? What color would that be? And it helps you actually, it's very healing. Or even if you're
Mm-hmm.
feeling something you want to release and let go of, you can use the intuitive art and to allow yourself to like, well, where is that feeling in my body? Where is that heaviness in my body? Or what color would that be if I could give it a voice? Or what would it look like? You know, you can even draw it and it will actually start to move the energy out of your field and help you to either release what you want to let go of or embody more of what you want to bring in. So I love that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious to know though, like for you specifically, personally, how is your clairvoyance activated? Is it more like a natural, sudden thing, or did you work on it, or like what happened?
It was, well, my initial awakening was very sudden because I literally was asleep. I mean, I went from, I was raised in a very conservative Christian upbringing, like I said. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know, I didn't even give it two thoughts. When I was 32 years old, when I had my awakening, I really didn't even know the word new age. We didn't talk about these things. So I didn't really even know that it existed. So it went on very quickly in some ways, but it was more clairaudience was the first thing for me. And then the recognition that I was an empath came in,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the clairvoyance, the specific gift of clairvoyance took some work. It took some effort for me. So I ended up taking first meditation classes because, again, I was this empath with just a sponge to the world. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized how much I was taking on my clients' energy. And I would go home. I'm like, where's the wine? Where's the chocolate? Where's the fries? I was just like, I didn't know, I was trying to ground and clear energy after a long day of touching people, shampooing hair, and doing that. I was just so exhausted all the time. And so that, also is part of what led to my awakening. So I started learning first meditation tools and understanding and having energetic boundaries, right? Which translates to boundaries with people in our life, right? As well. And then I actually went to a clairvoyant training school. So I actually took classes. I was in a year-long
Mm-hmm.
clairvoyant training program because for me, it took
Wow.
quite a long time. And I was, it doesn't have to. I think this was 2008. So I feel like the energy has shifted a lot and things that maybe took longer don't have to take as long
Mm-hmm.
now. I teach people and they can go in a 3-month course, 3 months time and get what took me a year to do back then, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also the program that I took didn't have activation work with it. And I think that does stimulate things. When I started getting energy work was actually after learning meditation and then trying to focus the
Mm-hmm.
energy. I find using the tools together. So for me personally, it felt a little bit long and arduous, but I have found a way to shortcut it. I do think working with activations, working from multiple angles, which is how I work with people, is activate the higher energy, start to heal the fears and blocks and programmings that's working against it, and then practice it. You need to kind of
Mm-hmm.
apply all three, and then you can, move through and start to work through energy that, or, open up your gifts in much quicker ways than you even thought possible. I had a student who didn't know what a chakra was, and 3 months later, reading auras. So it's important not to compare to other people. But I wanted to kind of give the contrast because I don't want you to think it has to take so long and be arduous. It doesn't,
Exactly.
But it's both. For me, I had a lot of fear. I grew up in an environment that, my parents, there's a lot of drinking and alcoholism and fighting. And so I think that environment as a kid made me extra afraid to open up, especially in that way. So I think there was a lot of healing I had to do before I was really willing to open that energy up again.
Brought up such a good point too, and that is such a good physical point, if you may,
Hmm.
where because when we talk about clairvoyance, we might think about spiritual and woo woo. So we are thinking about seeing spirit, right? We are only thinking about kind of things that are out of this world. However, clairvoyance, as its definition says, is just the ability to see. It's not necessarily seeing the unseen, although that is how it is usually being understood. And sometimes our fear is not just the fear of the unseen in terms of the spirit, it might just be the fear of something that is very physical. like in your case, for example, the fear of actually seeing the parents fighting, this or domestic violence if somebody grows up with that, or an alcoholic parents. Like if you see that growing up, it makes you afraid of seeing without realizing, because it's just a sight that is not nice to see and is so physical and tangible that we just close ourselves up, not wanting to see certain things. And by not wanting to see certain things, we are also closing up our ability to see the other things. So that's such
Yeah.
a great point you brought, which is why healing is so important.
Yeah, and another side of that, like, I'm glad you mentioned that because that was a point in my mind, like, "Oh, this would be important to share." So I'm glad it of course, comes right up, right? But I think for an empath and a sensitive or highly sensitive or intuitive empathic person, like I think most of your audience is, right? People watching, um, it's so liberating to be able to not have
Mm-hmm.
to sense the world through just your feelings. Now, I always advocate embodying your energy fully, and all of our gifts are equal and important. And it's all about embodiment work that I teach. However, if learning how to move into your third eye to look and heal deeper wounds is so liberating, because what happens is if you feel like you have to feel and experience and relive trauma in order to heal it, you will likely just stuff it down, avoid it, scapegoat it, numb it, think you've already dealt with it, and you'll just sort of glaze over the surface and you'll never get to the deeper healing that will actually liberate
Mm-hmm.
you on all levels. So when you learn to go into your third eye and you can start to look more objectively at your pain without having to become it, that is the most liberating, I think, aspect of my clairvoyant space that I cherish, actually, because it allows me to move through so much heavy energy in such a quick time, because you don't have to experience it or be afraid of it. You can look objectively, neutrally, from your third eye perspective, from your higher self perspective, and then clear the energy so that you can actually embody more of your higher self in your physical body again. So it's interesting
Mm-hmm.
how that works, and that's something that I think that doesn't get talked about a lot, actually, about the third eye, and it's one of the, I think, the most beautiful gifts for a sensitive person.
Mm-hmm. I also understand the part of the activation that you do is light language. Am I right?
Yes, I do light language as well as part of it.
And how does that, like, how do you use light language to help people with activating their clairvoyance? Or do you use it for other purpose? Because I saw that being mentioned in your free masterclass, which we'll get into. So I'm just curious, how do you use light language with in relation to that?
Well, I think light language works both in two ways. Sometimes you can have an intention behind it. So if I'm having an intention for a specific healing for a group, then I will just open up into that channeled space. The way light language turned on for me was later in my journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me, it feels like much more of a channeled energy. So when I'm doing a specific activation with an intention, I've kind of set the agreement for that ahead of time, and then I allow that energy to just move through me. And light language, it speaks beyond the mind. It's not something that's translatable
Mm-hmm.
into words. It's not a defined definition.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
What's beautiful about it is it's just this transmission that speaks to your heart and soul, and each individual person. So sometimes, like in my series, we had last time we had 900 people on 3 different channels at one time, and I did the light
Mm-hmm.
language. Everybody had a beautiful experience that was completely unique to them, and that's what I love about it, is it goes beyond the mind, beyond the thought. I'm not translating in that point. It's just allowing the energy to move through, and each person gets to pick, like, it almost like it stimulates the perfect recipe of energy alignment
Mm-hmm.
that each person needs that's completely unique to them. And so that's the beautiful gift of light language. And so I use it in many different ways, but in the series and the way that you're speaking to, there is an intention for helping to, activate their clairvoyance and heal or release what's needed in order for that to happen. And I'm always having the overarching what's ever highest and best for each person. And then I just allow it to go. I don't control. I just allow it to filter. And then people have their own purging and experiences and upliftment from it. So it's beautiful. It's a lot of fun.
Exactly. I mean, I love light language. So those of you who are listening will have known. So that's why I'm like, I need to ask that, just because I meet someone who speak light language like me. So I have to ask that.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, so you know how it is. It's
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So, it's always nice to see how people interpret it and how people explain it. sometimes you go like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, exactly." Because as you said, it goes beyond the mind. I always say it transcends time and space. It's multidimensional. Even if we set a specific intention, you might receive something completely different, at least to your mind,
Mhm.
completely different, but it's the exact thing that you need. And even if it is in a group setting, or even if it is an online masterclass, for example, some people
Mhm.
might think that, oh, but like it is not live. I don't know if it works, or like it is a group setting. I don't know if it works. But the thing about whether it's light language or activations, when we work with energy and even with theory, so to speak, there is energy behind those words. You will trust that you will receive exactly what you need, and that it will translate differently for each and everyone, despite the same word being said, the same activation being done, or same light language being transmitted. And I love how you actually have created such a beautiful 4 days, I believe, 4 days masterclass called Amplifying Your Clairvoyance. And it also helps you to develop your channeling abilities and other things. It basically covers everything we talk about today. Do you want to share more a little bit?
Yes, I'd love to share. It's one of my favorite series to run. Every time there's just so much positive feedback and breakthroughs for people. On day one, we open up and I talk about, how to work with, you're defining the intuitive, the different ways your intuition speaks to you, the different
Mm-hmm.
ways which you can interpret information, whether it's from your spirit guides, your higher self, the universe directly. And we do an activation around the vibrational scale. So you start to attune to lots of different spirit guides, which is really a lot of fun. And then I each day you have a content training, and then you have an activation, and then a little bit of something that you could take home and practice to help to
Mm-hmm.
cultivate that. And then day two, we work with activating your healing abilities. So you learn how to activate your own healing abilities. And the beautiful thing too is it will meet you where you're at. Sometimes I have students who have graduated my certification courses come back and do the free series every time I run it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you said, new group of people, new transmissions happening. Even if it's the same content, it's different. It meets
Mm-hmm.
you where you're at. And then on that day, we do some clearing on some of the fears around opening up to your gifts, which and your healing abilities as well. And then on day three is all about clairvoyance. So we deep dive into that. And I do a really powerful clairvoyant activation specifically on the third eye and really bringing it into that fifth dimensional exalted state. The
Mm-hmm.
energy shifts a bit as we are expanding our energy. And so that's always very powerful. Some people have their first visual experience, which is awesome. And then on day four, we talk about your channeling abilities and how those work together. And, through the series, it's kind of hitting each day independently as a training and activation, but then together all work together, which is really, really powerful. And so, yeah, it's a lot of fun. We have a really fabulous group, and it's a safe space to really share your experiences. Because I think that's
Mm-hmm.
another thing. So many of us have this feeling like the lone wolf or like the odd man out, or like we're just quiet and in the closet with our gifts, and it's like fun to have people that you can share with and be like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. I can celebrate. Or, oh my gosh, is this okay? I feel, nervous, being able to bring whatever's happening for you so that you can normalize it and know that you're not alone within it. So yeah, that's what I love doing that series. Mhm.
I'm glad you brought up the safe space of community, because as I was sharing earlier, it's so important that we feel safe.
Mhm.
And this community is created exactly for that. So whether you are someone who has just heard clairvoyance for the first time, then this is the opportunity to, test it out if you may. Or if you are someone who is on the other end of spectrum that think, am I going crazy? Maybe you are, or maybe you are not. But you have a safe space where you can share to check what is happening within you and around you. And all of the tools, is created in such a structured yet flexible way that it really supports you on physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So go on and check it out. And I'm going to drop it in the show notes so you can check it out later, as well as all the other information about Jen so you can connect with her, probably. Share your personal experience with clairvoyance or channeling or empath, whatever, whatever they come true. Maybe you think about something totally random, but it come true for you as you listen to this. Share it with us, either DM us on separately, or whichever you found us, you can always share with us because it's a safe space for you. With
Yes.
that, do you have any last parting words or message for our audience today?
I feel like sharing that you are powerful, just to remember that you are so very powerful. You're such a powerful, capable, divine being that's worthy of whatever it is you desire. So just know that whatever it is that you desire to have in your life, it's within reach for you. If you have a passion for something, then the opportunity, the energy, and the information that you need is there for you, and you have so much spiritual support. So I just want to honor and acknowledge you for being here, for the amazing gift that you are, and to just know that you have amazing gifts to share with the world. And I can't say wait to see what you create. Right? So fun to see people wake up and really own their power. So I think that's what I'm most passionate about.
Amazing. Yes, 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 yes. I You basically sum it up. I think that wraps up everything. So thank you so much, Jennifer. It's been a beautiful conversation. And yes, we are all powerful. And I can't wait to see all of you owning your power, sharing your gift, and shine your light with the world. So thanks again, Jennifer. And I'll see you around.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye for now.